Welcome to the beautiful harbor village of Elk Rapids. Located in northern Michigan, on the shores of Lake Michigan's Grand Traverse Bay, this is a summertime destination for many visitors drawn to the beautiful beaches, waterfront, and our small town village charm. It's this location that provides the setting for an interesting story about the preservation of our unique lakeside environment and the creation of a new chapter in Elk Rapids village history. Much of our local economy is derived from our waterfront location, and we would do just about anything to protect and improve the quality of our beautiful beaches in the harbor. Part 1 of our story begins on June 1st of this year. Mr. Randy Claremont of the Michigan Department of Natural Resources presented an informational meeting to the Elk Rapids citizens discussing plans for a restoration of fish habitat in the shoals located just off the beaches of Elk Rapids. For several years, Michigan biologists have been watching declining numbers of indigenous species of lake fish. They discovered that Elk Rapids uniquely possesses 3 rocky reefs, the last of their kind, located just off our beaches. They provide perfect spawning grounds for 3 important Great Lakes fish. Can you see the remains of the old dock? The 3 fish that spawn here are the lake whitefish, lake trout, and the lake herring, also known by fishermen as Cisco. While whitefish and lake trout are holding their own in numbers, it's the Cisco that has biologists worried. Their numbers have declined dramatically over the last few decades due to predators such as the sea lamprey, the round goby, and the rusty crayfish. Additionally, their habitat has been disappearing. Now the only commercial sales of Cisco are on the north shores of Lake Superior. The joint project of the Michigan DNR, biologists from Central Michigan University, and the Nature Conservancy have determined that the Elk Rapids reefs provide the perfect habitat for the spawning. These reefs consist of perfectly sized limestone rock cobble that provide perfect sized openings between the rocks, permitting the eggs to hide over winter and hatch in the spring without threat from the goby and the crayfish. The spawning beds consist of 3 separate reefs. The first 2 reefs are pristine and producing large numbers of the 3 species. It's the 3rd reef that must be rehabilitated. This is the location of an old dock that was built in the late 1800s. The wreckage from this old dock has cluttered the 3rd spawning bed. Cleanup must occur if the reef is to be restored. Crews went to work. After removing most of the debris and vacuuming up the site, they brought in a whole barge with 460 tons of softball-sized cobble from Ironton, Michigan, perfect for spawning Cisco, and they rebuilt the reef. Part 1 of our story seems to end here, but something seems to be missing. I'm reminded that those old rotting logs are the last reminders of a dark Elk Rapids past, and except for a few intrepid local historians, we seem to be ignoring our history of environmental destruction when our predecessors unknowingly destroyed Elk Rapids and its treasured natural resources. If my memory serves me correctly, back then, Elk Rapids was not the beautiful, clean resort town it is today. So we revisit history in Part 2. In fact, Elk Rapids was a dirty, filthy factory town that had poisoned the air and water around it. It took years to recover from this self-induced plague. The cleanup of the Elk Rapids Iron Factory dock site actually represents the final act of retribution and the burying of a very bad memory. No one seems to have noticed that this site is historically significant, and it probably should be memorialized. To prove this, let's journey back in time. The first hint that we were going in the wrong direction occurred when our earliest businessmen determined that our extensive white pine forests could be logged and sold to rebuild Chicago after their fire of 1871. When this resource was exhausted, they turned to our abundant hardwoods of beech, maple, and oak, perfect for making charcoal, and charcoal is needed to smelt iron ore. Along came Messrs. Dexter and Noble. A great factory and steel furnace was built on the shores of Elk River, along with a charcoal factory and a cement plant. Realizing that the toxic fumes from the charcoal factory could be harvested to produce acetate of lime and wood alcohol, a chemical plant was constructed. The processing of pig iron into industrial grade steel requires tons of limestone and iron ore. A great dock was built, but not just any dock, but one that would allow railroad flatbed and gondola cars to roll up on the dock and load tons of limestone and iron ore for the factory, and then return with the processed iron to be shipped by sail clippers to steel factories all around Lake Michigan. They built a dock that might last 130 years. Around this time, there were about 365 workers in the plants, with 7 churches and 7 saloons. Main Street, Elk Rapids, looked a little different then. The industrial poisoning of the air and the waters we now treasure must have been severe. It continued into the 1920s until the Antrim County natural resources were gone. The Elk Rapids Iron Company called it quits when the forests used to make charcoal were gone and new iron smelting technologies were taking over. The Elk Rapids Portland Cement Company had to shut down when they ran out of their supply of marl dug out of the Petabago Bog just south of town. Elk Rapids, like its resources, was not sustainable. It almost became a ghost town. It wasn't for several years before some businessmen came up with a plan to rebuild the village economy. They decided to build a golf course and take advantage of a new fad called motor touring. Those newfangled automobiles allowed downstaters to rent local cabins and enjoy our lakes. Tourism had arrived, and Elk Rapids was reborn. Now, besides the old dock, we have only 2 memories. Located just off the parking lot of a local restaurant on the Elk River is the remains of the original Elk Rapids Iron Company furnace. In its prime, was 47 feet tall and 12 feet in diameter, spewing smoke for 24 hours a day. A more benign, non-toxic reminder takes place around town when our Elk Rapids Garden Club ladies unearth chunks of iron ore slag, the crystallized molten sand byproduct of the smelting process. The lesson we needed to learn was that history must be remembered as we undertake new projects with our environment. We have come so far from exploiting our natural resources for economic gain to understanding the need for sustainability and conservation. Perhaps we can avoid the mistakes of our past. As an example, What if a multinational Native American syndicate decides that the Elk Rapids Harbor would be the perfect location for a spectacular hotel casino to be built off the shores of our sandy beaches? A century or so later, we might be wondering where the fish went and thinking about how we'll remove the cement pylons, not unlike the rotting oak logs of our iron company dock past. Finally, our story concludes where it began. Remember when the conservationists first came to Elk Rapids with their plan to restore a fish habitat? Little mention, if any, was given to the fact that this was an important historical site with great environmental significance. They chose as their meeting venue the Elk Rapids Historical Museum, where you would think historical relevance should be required. Additionally, this museum is housed in the old Elk Rapids Methodist Church, almost sanctifying the history it archives. And yet there's more irony. A great word choice for an old iron town. The Historical Museum is the old Elk Rapids Methodist Church, built in 1902. One of the 7 original churches that was probably attended by the boys and men who worked on the Iron Company dock. As the meeting convened in that old church, I can't help but imagine the presence of those spirits as their history was being ignored.